Welcome to My Long Island TV. From Manhasset to Montauk, we have traveled our communities to bring you the following events. I'm your host, Waldo Cabrera. My Long Island TV starts now. Hi, I'm Waldo Cabrera with My Long Island TV, and I'm here with Congressman Bishop. You've represented your community since 2003, looking for another term.
I hope so, yes.
2 cycles ago, you were elected by the smallest of margins. What did you learn from that?
I had reinforced for me something that I've really always known, which is that every single thing you do in a campaign really matters. Every interaction with every constituent, every phone call, every door knock. That was a very graphic reminder, to win by fewer than 600 votes out of 200,000 cast. It's also the other thing I recognized is the fact that I have had tough races, that I and my team we've learned how to win tough races. We know how to win tough races. We've been in tough ones, and one of the reasons a great many of my Democratic colleagues lost in 2010 was that they were rusty. They had gotten out of shape because they hadn't had to run tough races, and we had, and so we were ready for it. And we're ready this time as well.
Why should you get another term?
I think because I've done the job. I mean, I've been elected to do the best possible job of representing the people of the first district that I can, and I believe I've done that. I mean, believe I've brought the federal government to the table to help local government resolve issues. I've brought money to the table to help local government deal with matters that are of importance to the constituencies that we collectively represent. I'm growing in seniority. I'm growing in influence in the Congress. I have a senior position on what's called the Water Resources and Environment Committee of the Congress, which deals with everything the Army Corps of Engineers does, which is hugely important to our district, deals with issues like wastewater infrastructure, which is hugely important to our district, and I've become a national leader on that subject. And then the other area where I'm certainly recognized for my leadership role is in higher ed policy, and higher ed is hugely important to Long Island as an industry, but it's also very important to the people that I represent in terms of providing their pathway to the middle class. And so those are areas that I've concentrated on. Those are areas where I'm looked to by my colleagues and by the advocacy community for leadership. And so I think that's what I bring. That's what I have brought to the table over the 12 years that I've been there, and that's what I will continue to do.
At the top of any voter's list are jobs. What industries can be stimulated on the East End?
Let me give you, first off, the East End is doing fairly well. It has rebounded from the real estate collapse and the economic collapse of 07 and 08. So building is back, real estate is back. Small businesses are doing well. The East End has two elements to the East End economy. One is travel and tourism, and the other is everything associated with the second home industry. And when I say East End, I'm basically describing Riverhead and East. And so those are all doing fairly well. But here's the key, and this is one of the reasons that I've been as focused on environmental issues as I have been throughout my career. I have I think a career rating with the LCV and the Sierra Club and so on of somewhere in the 98% of my votes are endorsed by the LCV and the Sierra Club and other environmental organizations. For Eastern Long Island, the environment is the economy. There's a false choice that people put out there a lot, that if you're pro-environment, that means you're anti-business. That's absolutely wrong, and it's particularly wrong if you live on Eastern Long Island. To be pro-environment on Eastern Long Island is to be pro-economy, pro-business. And I would contrast my record, which is very strong on the environment, with my opponent. He's got the worst environmental voting record of all 63 New York State senators. That's not what the East End needs. We need somebody who recognizes that the environment is a crucial part of our economic stability. That's why I've been as concerned as I have been about water quality, about shoreline protection, about wastewater infrastructure. Those are all issues that are hugely important to Eastern Long Island.
We'll talk about healthcare for a minute. The Republicans are using this as a weapon against Democrats. What's your strategy? Is it a strong defense or a strong offense? Or is there a reason to defend it as much as they think it should
Well,
be?
I think one of the things Republicans are learning is that the health care attacks are not as potent as they thought they were. And that's because the Affordable Care Act is actually working. More people are insured now in this country than has been the case for the last several decades. The rate at which health care expenditures is increasing has moderated tremendously. Medicare, long-term expenses for Medicare and Medicaid are now estimated by the Congressional Budget Office to be $1.2 trillion less over a 10-year period than had previously been the case. That's in part because of the payment reforms and the efficiencies built into the Affordable Care Act. And that's savings, by the way, generated without any reduction in service, without any increase in copays, no denial of procedures. It's real entitlement reform. So I think that more and more people are recognizing that the Affordable Care Act is actually working. There will still be the horror stories that people will put out there, most of which turn out to be not true, and there will still be efforts to knock down the Affordable Care Act. But for the most part, now, clearly, there's work to be done. Clearly, it's not a perfect piece of legislation, and clearly, improvements and fixes have to be put in place. But two big goals for the Affordable Care Act. One was to increase the number of insured people in this country. That's happening. And the second was to bend the cost curve, to moderate the extent to which healthcare costs are increasing. That's happening. So we're early into it, but thus far it's working. We still have work to do. The other thing I would say is all of the people who talk about how you got to repeal the Affordable Care Act, my opponent is one of them. I'm dying to hear what their solution is, what their alternative is. 52 times in the House of Representatives, we've voted to repeal all or part of the Affordable Care Act. Obviously, I've voted against every one of those 52. Not once has the Republican majority in the House brought forward a piece of legislation that would say, okay, we don't like the Affordable Care Act, here's what we'll replace it with. That's a reasonable basis to have a debate, when you have one thing and you match it against something else. But when you have one thing and there's nothing presented in the alternative, that's not a reasonable basis for a debate.
It seems that we are just a half step away from another war. What is the proper path going forward with all of these countries, in particular Russia?
Well, I think with Russia, we need to work with our allies in the European Union to make it very clear to Russia that their behavior with respect to Ukraine is unacceptable, and that will not be without consequence. And a great many European countries rely to a significant extent for their energy on Russia. And so they have been reluctant to engage in the kind of sanctions that I'm talking about. But I don't think Russia is going to respond to any other message other than economics.
This Congress lately, it seems that it's at an all-time high when it comes to internal infighting, and we're stagnating. What have you been able to do to try to break this gridlock?
Well, I'll just give you, first off, your assessment of the gridlock is absolutely right. And my own view is that there was always partisanship, but we always found a way to rise above it in my first several terms. But the Tea Party class of 2010 that came to power changed the dynamic and tipped us over into the dysfunction and the paralysis that we have now. And so I think that has been, the influence of the Tea Party in the House of Representatives has been debilitating and corrosive in my view. I'll tell you what I've done. I view myself as a pragmatic problem solver. This Congress has passed very few pieces of substantive legislation, almost none. One of the ones they have passed, something called the Water Resources Development Act, I was one of 4 people in the House to write. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. We spent the summer of 13 hashing out our differences, compromising, giving a little, taking a little. We did it cooperatively. We did it with mutual trust and mutual respect. And we produced a bill that got 413 votes in the House of Representatives. That's not easy. And so that, I think, stands as an example of how I approach the legislative piece of my job and what I have done and what I'm prepared to continue to do. I want to rise above the partisanship. I don't think compromise is a four-letter word, which is what a lot of my Republican colleagues think, that it's particularly the Tea Party, when they think it's an abandonment of principle. I don't. I think compromise is how you move forward in this country. I will partner with anyone that I think will help us reach the kind of public policy directives that we need to move this country forward.
Congressman Tim Bishop, representing the 1st New York Congressional District, thank you for taking time out.
Thank you for having me on.